A New Crisis, Chapter 2. Awkward Moments. Twilight, Applejack, and Rarity stood in the courtyard of Canterlot Castle, stretching their wings. The problem was, none of them knew how to use them. For Applejack, the problem was doubled, since most of her senses were playing tricks on her ever since she had been transformed. She felt the magic around her, and could even see strands of it run through each and every thing around her. Rarity had told her that this was perfectly normal, even so she had never seen them so clearly. Twilight was first to try and lift off. She was successful, or so it seemed. She rose into the air for several hoofs, before she lost control over her wings and crashed right down to the floor again. Rainbow Dash, who had been watching the whole scene, fell over laughing while holding her belly. "Very funny, Rainbow. A little help?" Twilight snorted as Applejack and Rarity helped her to her hoofs. "Sorry, Twi. It's just you fly worse than Scootaloo on her first try." "Rainbow Dash, are ya coming or not? We could really use some advice here." Rainbow Dash took her sweet time coming down. She saw it out of the window she had been watching from and landed right between her friends. "Sorry, guys. It's practically easy to fly. You will not be able to fly as well as me right away, but you should be able to get where you want to go." With that, she took position in front of the three other alicorns and spread her wings. "At first, spread your wings like this and make sure they are not tilted into any direction. They have to be straight for liftoff. It is very important that you shift your weight to your hindquarters once you are in the air. Keep your wings straight and make sure they don't adapt the same angle of your body. They must be level with the horizon. Okay, now, try to hover, but be careful. I have already noticed that these alicorn wings are quite different." The three friends looked at each other, and Rainbow Dash in turn, before all three of them spread their wings and flapped them once, just like Rainbow had told them. However, Rarity was the only one who was able to accomplish the task. She still remembered her temporary wings from when she had joined the Best Young Flyers competition, so she already knew the basics. Twilight, upon giving her wings a quick flap, shot into the air like a bullet, screaming while she shot up through the clouds towards the sun. Applejack had her wings not angled correctly, and shot straight forward after giving her wings an equally hard flap. Rainbow had to decide in the split of a second after who of her friends she would fly first. She decided for Applejack and shot off into the direction of the orange alicorn had shot off to, instantly breaking the sound barrier, creating a sonic rainbow that made many of the trees in the courtyard shake. She caught up with her friend in less than a second. After she had grabbed Applejack with her mind, doing so instinctively, she changed her direction and flew after Twilight. Twilight had already left the highest clouds behind her, and still she was not slowing down. She could feel as her lungs began to burn with a lack of oxygen in the air that became thinner and thinner the higher she flew. In the distance she saw Rainbow Dash coming towards her, but her friend would not come in time, that much she knew. With all her willpower she shifted her weight forward, so her nose pointed slightly downwards. With another hard flap of her wings, Twilight shot downwards in an uncomfortable angle. She could feel heat building on her coat as she re-entered the lower atmosphere, but there were no flames, as she had anticipated. She could see Equestria pass below her. Vancouver, Manhattan, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Huffington. Twilight shifted her weight again, so her hind legs were now beneath her, flapping her wings for the third time. She came to a hovering halt and began to flap her wings more gently. She had finally figured out how to fly. It had almost killed her, but she had finally managed it. It was all about force control and shifting one's weight, which was pretty much like using magic. From behind her she heard three loud bangs and turned around. Before her head was fully turned, she could already hear Rainbow Dash's voice right beside her. "Wow, Twilight, that was so awesome!" Rainbow said while levitating Applejack at her side. Applejack looked kind of sick. She was by far not used to this kind of speed, nor the height they were at. The whirling colors of magic that surrounded her also didn't help. Twilight noticed that her friend was able to use basic magic, and also gave a loud cheer, just before she noticed Applejack, who was a little green around the muzzle. "Applejack, you okay?" she asked, concerned.
"Yeah, just let me catch my—"
But Applejack began to throw up in Rainbow Dash's gentle cyan-colored magic grip.
"Whoa, whoa, whoa, AJ, blah! That's disgusting!"
Rainbow shouted, attempting a landing with her friend in tow. Twilight, on her part, used her magic to catch Applejack's puke and threw it way past Huffington's city limits. The town had been her home for the last 50 years, and she could not help but remove it. From her vantage point she could see the 4-story building she had bought many years ago with her late husband. A few tears formed in her eyes. She had outlived her stallion, and would now also outlive the rest of her family. Discord should have taken care of everything concerning her death by now, so there was really no point in— She wiped a few tears from her eyes, ignoring the consequences. She had never wanted to see her family, to know who she really was, but right now she wanted to see them again. She landed in a side street near her home and used her newfound Alicon magic to change back into Midnight Glow. Midnight slowly approached her house. The building was built of grey stone and had a red tilted roof. As she knocked on the door, an orange-coated Earth Pony mare with blue mane and tail opened the door. She wore a black hat and dress. She did not look her in the eye, but Glow knew who it was. It was her granddaughter, Evening Shine.
"Hey, Shine, mind letting me in? I think I forgot my keys,"
she said, attempting to walk past her granddaughter. At the sound of her voice, Evening Shine's head jerked up. Her ears had been laying on her head just moments before, perked up now. With white-green eyes, she stared at her grandmother, tears streaming down her face. The mare staggered slightly, and a stallion from the back, who Midnight identified as her granddaughter's husband, ran to her side to help her steady herself. "What's wrong, darling? Who is it?" the pink stallion with red mane said, before his eyes also shot open so wide they could be mistaken for saucers.
"Come on, you guys. Are you really that surprised to see me? I mean, this is my house,"
Midnight chuckled. Then it struck her. Just earlier she had thought about Discord having taken care of her burial. She pushed past the 2 stunned ponies into a room full of shocked ponies. All her sons, daughters, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren were there, and looked at her in stunned surprise. The only pony that was missing was her butler, but she knew where she could find him. In the middle of the room stood a black coffin, which the lid stood open. Inside was—
"Discord, come on. I don't want you to scare every pony," she said softly as she approached her own coffin.
The corpse opened one eye and looked at her curiously.
"Oh, so we can stop pretending now?"
it said in her own voice, making some of the relatives in attendance faint. With a flash of light, her doppelganger changed to his original form, and the draconis stretched as he addressed the stunned ponies around him.
"Hello there, my name is Discord. Bringing chaos is my game, but I won't explain you anything. I think our freshly revived hero owes us all, and me included, quite the explanation,"
he said, bowing to the crowd.
Granny? Is that really you?"
One of her grandsons approached her carefully.
"Yes, Bold,"
she said, sighing.
"And I think Discord here is right. I owe all of you an explanation,"
she added, nodding to Discord, who summoned a chair for her to sit down.
"What is the meaning of this?"
her oldest daughter asked.
"That coffin cost a small fortune, and now you just show up here as if nothing happened,"
she added. Midnight Glow sighed again, and Discord summoned a cup of tea for her. After taking a sip of it, she looked at her oldest daughter. They had never gotten along very well, and she could only imagine that she was already thinking about selling her house and all of her belongings.
"Sunrise, I am very sorry to disappoint you with me not being dead and all, but I can assure you that I will pay you back. If all of you have not wasted what I have saved up over the years, I should still be fairly wealthy,"
Glow said, sighing slightly.
I made sure the splitting of your funds would have taken place after the funeral,"
Discord informed her. A little Pegasus filly came running up to her after having digested the shock of her great-grandmother still being alive. "Granny!" she shouted as she almost tipped the chair over on which Glow was sitting. Glow embraced her great-granddaughter tightly. From all her relatives, the little one was her favorite by far. "So, care to explain? What is that creature serving you, and how come you are still alive?" one of her sons-in-law asked.
"Well, prepared for another shock?"
she asked mischievously. Putting her great-granddaughter back to the ground, she stood up, handed Discord the cup of tea he had summoned for her, and released the spell she had put onto herself earlier. All ponies in attendance and Discord were shocked to find a lavender-coated alicorn standing in the spot their mother, grandmother, or great-grandmother had stood just moments ago. "I must explain to you, my dear relatives, that the stories I have been telling all of you and that made me rich were not just stories. You all know the war really happened, but you all thought I knew all of it because of extensive research. Part of that is true, but my name is not Midnight Glow. I am the element of magic amongst the elements of harmony. My real name is Twilight Sparkle." A hoof struck her face as she looked at her attacker in utter surprise, as she looked into the green eyes of her youngest daughter, who had broken out in tears.
"So you have lied to us all our lives? How could you? Do you even know how I felt when Greenscript informed me of your passing?"
The blue mare shouted at her with a cracking voice.
"I'm terribly sorry, Radiance. I really am. You were never to find out about my past, but things have changed. The thing is, as a matter of fact, I did die. But the elements of harmony saved my life, and I am once more called upon to defend Equestria together with the other elements."
"The other elements? Does that mean—"
Discord asked hopefully.
"Yes, she's probably already waiting for you, Discord. Go to her. She's at the palace,"
Twilight said with a smile. With a snap of his fingers and a grin, Discord disappeared. Twilight couldn't help but smile. She knew one of her friends would be very happy to see him.
"So let me get this straight. You are the Twilight Sparkle? The Princess Twilight Sparkle that abandoned her subjects and went into hiding?"
her oldest daughter asked, flapping her wings disgustedly.
"Yes, I am. But all of you know why I did it,"
she responded with equal venom in her voice, while Dusk was already climbing on her back, marveling at her great-grandmother's wings.
"You hid from Celestia, and I understand why you did it, but you should have told us. And by the way, why did you ascend now? What is that danger you are called to defend us from?" her middle son asked.
With a sigh, Twilight settled on the ground, so her great-granddaughter could stay on her back. She started to explain everything to her family, how she had escaped the prison, how she had brought her friends one by one into the crystal grave. Rainbow Dash stroked her friend's back, as she still was throwing up into a stream near the marketplace. Many ponies had been looking at them. Seeing the princess these days was very rare, but seeing 2 alicorns in the middle of town without any kind of warning was even more of a surprise. Rainbow Dash did not care about them much. All that matters to her right now was that Applejack got better. A yellow Pegasus stallion approached the pair cautiously. "Excuse me, your highnesses? I presume you are new princesses? Is there anything I can do to help you? I mean, no offense, but that stream holds our drinking water, so you might please stop polluting it," he said with a bow. Rainbow was taken aback a little to be addressed as a princess.
"No, sorry, my friend here is just a little airsick. She's not used to being an alicorn yet. Is there a place where she can get some rest?" Rainbow asked.
"Well, you could go to Midnight Glow's house, but they are holding her funeral right now. Usually the butler Greenscript always has a room prepared for strangers. I don't know if they would," he stammered, still bowing.
"No problem. Better than nothing, I suppose. Can you show us the way?"
she said, while putting Applejack on her back. After a few minutes, the trio arrived in front of a 4-story building. Rainbow had been here before, when she had visited Twilight. As her friend was nowhere to be seen, she assumed that Twilight had actually went home. It was no surprise the stallion that had approached her did not recognize Rainbow. She, on the other hoof, knew him well. He was a waiter in one of her favorite cafes here in Huffington, but he would only know her as Miss Thundercloud, an elderly black-coated Pegasus mare with a grey mane and tail. As she knocked on the door, she was not surprised that it was Twilight who opened the door.
"Oh, Rainbow, Applejack, perfect timing. I think my family could use some confirmation of my story. They don't seem to believe me completely."
Twilight smirked. "I fear we have no time for that, you three. Rarity's already on her way to the Crystal Empire with Fluttershy, and you three have played around enough, I think," came a stern voice from behind Rainbow Dash. As the three looked at whom had spoken, they found a not very amused Princess Celestia staring at them. All the ponies in attendance bowed respectfully, except the 3 alicorns. They just looked at her in utter surprise and disbelief.
"How?"
Twilight asked, surprised.
"It was not very difficult to find you, my faithful student. Your magical aura could be felt all the way to Canterlot when you used that illusion spell,"
Celestia clarified, looking away from them. She was still not comfortable around them. Celestia knew that she had done the right thing this time, but the consequences were dire. That she had not thought about them before Hoof made it even harder for her to look at her student. After a short while in which the 4 alicorns spoke about their tasks once again, it was decided that Applejack and Rainbow Dash were to return to the palace, while Rarity would accomplish her mission with Fluttershy at her side. Twilight was to leave immediately for the Everfree Forest, but Princess Celestia promised to stay behind to explain everything to her family. That was, in fact, the only thing that convinced Twilight to go. Twilight did not quite trust Celestia fully yet, but she had so far done nothing to make her distrust her. She would still keep an eye on her former mentor. After assuring her family that she would return as soon as she could, and allowing all of them to stay in her house for the time being, Twilight flew off into the direction she had wanted to go to in the first place. The second time around, she found it much easier to fly. It actually felt good to feel the wind brush through her feathers. A few minutes later, Huffington lay not far from Ponyville, and closer even to the Everfree Forest. Twilight could not resist. Doing a quick flap of her wings, she shot off into the direction of Ponyville. For only a few seconds did she fly over her former home, to find that not many things had changed. Sweet Apple Acres was still there, and so was her library. As she saw Spike come out of it, wearing a blue apron, she could not resist but land right in front of him. The dragon was startled at her sudden appearance, and even more so of her change.
"Twilight, man, don't surprise me like that," he said, putting a hand on his chest. "I'm sorry, Spike. I was on my way to meet with Luna, and then I thought I might as well fly over Ponyville. That's when I spotted you," she said, hugging him.
Spike returned the hug, but soon broke out of the embrace, looking at his big sister.
"Twilight, why are you on your way to the Everfree Forest? I mean, it's not the safest place these days. The Children of the Night keep a vigilant watch over the forest these days, and we have suffered some casualties over the last few years," he inquired. "What do you mean? I'm sure Luna would not want to hurt any pony, if she didn't have to," Twilight said, frowning. "I don't think she means to hurt any pony, Twilight. Ah, well, I guess you will see for yourself. You should really get going. Ponies are staring at you. Unless you have time to hold a speech, I suggest we catch up later," Spike said, indicating several ponies that came their way. One old mare in particular, however, rooted Twilight to the spot. She must have been about 70, but Twilight recognized her immediately. Her mane was still a little red, while it was decorated with the same red ribbon she remembered. Her yellow coat was scarred in places, but it was definitely— "Apple Bloom?"
Twilight stammered as she ran up to the mare, whose cutie mark was a single seed from which sprouted a beautiful flower.
Twilight?
No,
That can't be you. Where have you been? Where's Applejack?
the mare called out as she embraced Twilight, tears streaming from her face.
Applebloom, I am so sorry we left you alone. I promise you, I will come back and talk to you about everything. Applejack is alive and fairly well,
she said, weeping, before releasing the elderly mare and flying off into the direction of the everfree forest, tears streaming from her face. She had been happy to see Spike, but seeing Applebloom, who she only remembered as a filly, was too much for her. As fast as she could, she raced through the streets of Ponyville with her new wings. Not able to take it anymore, she flew upwards, not to see so many familiar faces anymore, who had aged so much. Rainbow Dash would have been in awe of her speed, when she was still a Pegasus. At the edge of the everfree forest, she landed without slowing down. A giant dust cloud rose up from the place of her impact while her hoofs dug into the ground for several inches. Once she could see again, she noticed that she was buried so deep that her belly almost touched the ground. Looking ahead of herself, Twilight could see several pairs of eyes beginning to glow in the darkness of the forest. A voice shouted at her from the darkness. She knew that voice, but couldn't place a hoof on it right now. It had been so long since she had last heard it.
You will leave now or face the consequences. In the name of our dear mother, we order you to leave the perimeter.
A male voice cut off the female speaker before she could shout any more threats.
Hey, what are you doing? You know our orders,
the female voice said aggressively.
And you know the exception of our orders. We are to bring Twilight Sparkle to Luna, should she ever come here, the male voice reprimanded.
Twilight felt herself being looked over as a light brown alicorn stepped out of the everfree forest darkness.
I will admit that she looks a lot like her, but it can't be Twilight. Twilight is supposed to be a half alicorn. This one is a full alicorn, the alicorn mare said.
You can trust me to recognize my sister, the male voice said as a white unicorn stallion with blue mane stepped into the light.
Shining armor?
Twilight asked, shocked.
Yes, it's me, Twily. So why are you a full alicorn? Long story, but right now I must talk to Luna. By the way, would you introduce me to your friend? I mean, she does look kind of familiar,
Twilight responded, trying not to stare at the light brown mare.
This is Stardancer, Luna's granddaughter,
Shining Armor explained.
Pleased to meet you, Miss Sparkle. I believe you knew my mother,
Stardancer clarified.
Oh, your mother. Now I remember. Moonsinger. So you're Moonsinger's girl. I must say you are the mirror image of your mother, Twilight said, shocked. I am pleased you might think so, but my mother had a harder time controlling her emotions. She fought to defend Equestria and died. I just hope I don't ever have to make the same mistakes, the light brown alicorn said, letting her head hang. The two ponies helped Twilight out of the 4 holes her legs had dug, and escorted her inside the forest. Once her eyes had adjusted to the eternal darkness inside the forest, she could see thousands of ponies that hid inside the shadows. Had Shining Armor not have been there, she might have been forced to fight all those ponies. From the stories she heard when she had traveled the land, she knew those ponies were very strong. Twilight was sure that she would have died in trying to defend herself. As they passed into the barrier that was the garden, Shining Armor had explained many things to Twilight. He had decided to stay at Luna's side after she had returned to the garden. She had been mourning Moonsinger, and even though he had met her only briefly, he had come to like her as well. After a short while, he had discovered that he did not want to leave the garden ever again. As he had written to Cadance about it, she had informed him that she had found a new lover. As they both had been unwilling to leave wherever they were, they came to the agreement to dissolve their marriage. Soon after, Shining Armor had married Goldshield, who had stayed with him in the garden. Stardancer, who had been with friends of hers during the war, had later then been raised by Luna herself. Brightlight, her father, had died during the fight for Canterlot, so the young foal had no pony else to turn to.
It was Twilight's first time in Luna's refuge, and she marveled at the vastness of the land as she took off with Moondancer. Luna was, as she had been informed, not in Gemini at the time. She was visiting Orion to teach at the local school for unicorns, where she was a professor on Alicon magic and theory. Shining Armor stayed back in Gemini to make arrangement to help his sister, should Luna agree to help her sister once again. "But this brings up one question, Stardancer. Why did you ascend?" Twilight wanted to know, while they soared through the sky inside the barrier. "Luna wanted me to. You will find that there are many alicorns here. The gift our dear mother's barrier gives each and every one of us has gotten stronger since she became a full alicorn. That resulted in many natural ascensions. Not all unicorns, however, do so, and Mother discourages it, due to the side effects. She wanted me to ascend, so I could take her place, should she die one day," the light-brown alicorn mare explained, while flying close to Twilight. "Die? Isn't she immortal?" "Yes, she is, but my mother's death has shown her that she is only relatively immortal. A battle or an accident could still kill her. I want her to be happy, but that fact makes her depressed many times," Stardancer said, depressed herself. I understand." The two flew the rest of the way without saying another word, until they reached a big city in which center stood a gigantic building. It was built of white marble, and Twilight got the feeling, just by looking at it, that this was a place of learning. In front stood a statue that was also made out of white marble. It showed an alicorn that looked much like Stardancer. Landing in front of it, Twilight looked up into the dead alicorn's eyes. Moonsinger had saved her life once, and she had never been able to properly thank her for it. Had she known, at any point, that Moonsinger would run into the trap that had cost her life, she would have turned back immediately to help her. She would have been there to repay the favor. Twilight's eyes began to water as a melodical voice could be heard. "Twilight? Oh my goodness, it is you!" a dark blue alicorn mare said as she approached Twilight. Her mane was slightly shorter than what Twilight remembered it to be, and she wore glasses on her nose. Her back carried 2 saddlebags that were filled to the point of bursting with books and scrolls. As Twilight turned to her, she threw those aside and ran up to her. Twilight felt the wind being knocked out of her as a dark blue bullet hit her, knocking her sprawling right through the statue, destroying it in the process.